Learning objectives. After completing this module, learners will be able to relate the Indian textile to the world market, recall the history related to trade, relate Indian textiles and European market, define weavers, explain the reason for the decline of Indian textiles, describe Wootz steel, describe the emergence of iron and steel factories in India. Indian textiles and the world market. The crafts and industries of India during British rule focused on two industries: textiles, iron and steel. The conquest and colonization of India had a close relationship with industrialization of Britain. With the growing of industrial production, British industrialists began to see India as a huge market for selling of their industrial products. And after a few years, manufactured goods from Britain began flooding India. Indian textiles and the world market. Around 1750, India was the world's largest producer of cotton textiles before Britain had conquered Bengal. Indian textile was renowned both for its fine quality and extremely beautiful and delicate craftsmanship. In the late 18th century, the company was buying goods in India and exporting them to England and Europe for making profit through the sale. Words tell us histories. Indian textiles were famous in Western markets under different names such as muslin and calico, derived from calicut. Printed cotton cloths called chintz, derived from chint, and bandana, derived from bandhana or tie and dye, were the pieces ordered in bulk because of their beautiful and delicate floral designs, fine texture, and cheap price. The word bandhana is now used as bandana, which refers to brightly colored and printed cloth used for making scarves for neck. Indian textiles in European markets. Calico Act. Legislation was passed by the British government in 1720 to ban the use of printed cotton textiles, chintz, in England. This act was popularly known as Calico Act. Indian designs were copied and printed in England on white muslin or plain unbleached Indian cloth. Development of textile industries just began to flourish in England, but they were incompetent with Indian textiles. The competition with Indian textiles led to many technological innovations in England, like in 1764, spinning jenny was invented by John Kay to increase the productivity of the traditional spindles. In 1786, steam engine was invented by Richard Arkwright, which revolutionized cotton textile weaving. World was dominated by the Indian textiles by the end of 18th century. Silver was imported by India in exchange of cotton and silk to European trading companies, the Dutch, the English, the French. Who were the weavers? Weavers belonged to communities that were specialized in the art of weaving. Examples: Tanti weavers from Bengal, Julahas or Momin weavers from North India, Kaikolar and Devangs from South India. Stages of production. Stage 1. Spinning. Spinning was done using charkha and takli. A thread was spun over charkha and rolled on takli. Spinning was done by women. Stage 2. Weaving of thread to cloth by weaver. Weavers were mostly men. Weaving techniques. For colored textiles, the thread was dyed by dyer, also known as rangres. For printed cloth, Weavers needed chipigars who were specialists in block printing. The decline of Indian textiles. The development of cotton textile industries in Britain affected Indian textile producers in many ways. It led to competition of Indian textiles with British textiles in the European and American markets. High duties were imposed on Indian textiles, therefore exporting Indian textiles to England became difficult. Towards the beginning of the 19th century, Britain cotton textile industries took over Indian textile goods from their traditional markets in Africa, America and Europe. English and European companies stopped buying Indian goods. By the 1830s, British cotton cloth came to Indian markets. Rural women who made a living by spinning cotton thread in India became jobless. Mahatma Gandhi encouraged people to boycott imported textiles during the national movement and used hand-spun and hand-woven cloth, khadi, which became a symbol of nationalism. Cotton mills come up. In 1854, the first cotton mill in India was set up as a spinning mill in Bombay. By 1900, more than 84 mills started operating in Bombay. During First World War, the first major increase in the development of cotton factory production in India was observed, because the textile imports from Britain were declined and Indian factories were called upon to produce cloth for military supplies. The Sword of Tipu Sultan and Wootz Steel. Tipu Sultan ruled Mysore till 1799. He fought 4 wars with the British. Tipu Sultan dies fighting with the British holding his sword in hand. His swords were later displayed in museums of England. Swords of Tipu Sultan were hard, sharp-edged and made up of Wootz steel. These special kind of swords made up of high carbon steel called Wootz was produced all over South India. European scientists were attracted to Indian Wootz steel making. The process of Wootz steel making was widely known in South India, completely disappeared in India by the mid-19th century. Due to the British conquest in India, the swords and armor-making industry died, and India started importing iron and steel from England, replacing the Indian iron and steel craftsmen. Abandoned furnaces in villages. A highly specialized technique of refining iron was required for the production of Wootz steel. A decline in the craft of iron smelting was observed in 19th century. Many craftsmen given up their craft and looked for other means of livelihood. The artisans producing iron and steel faced a new competitions in the early 20th century. Iron and steel factories in India. Iron and steel factories. In 1904, Charles Weld, an American geologist, and Dorabji Tata, the eldest son of Jamsetji Tata, set up a modern iron and steel plant in India. The Tata Iron and Steel Company, TISCO, came up in 1912 for the first time in India and began producing steel. After 2 years of TISCO, in 1914, the First World War broke out. The steel produced in Britain was used to meet the demand of war in Europe. This led to the decline of imports of British steel into India, and therefore Indian Railways turned to Tisco for supply of iron and steel for rails. As the World War continued for 4 years, Tisco even produced shells and carriage wheels for the war. By 1919, 90% of the total steel produced by Tisco was used by colonial government. Over a span of time, Tisco became the biggest steel industry of India within the British Empire. Summary. Let us summarize what we have learned. Around 1750, India was world's largest producer of cotton textiles. Indian clothes like muslin, chintz, corsets, etc. were famous worldwide. British completion with Indian textiles led to many technological inventions in England. In 1764, spinning jenny was invented by John Kay in England. Weavers are the communities that are specialized in weaving. The Tanti weavers of Bengal, the Julahas or Momin weavers of North India are some examples of weavers in India. Export of Indian textiles to England become extremely difficult because of high duties imposed on Indian textiles imports in Britain, which led to the decline of Indian textiles. In 1854, first cotton mill was set up as a spinning mill in Bombay. Tipu Sultan ruled Mysore till 1799. He died in a war with Britain with his sword in his hand. In 1912, the Tata Iron and Steel Company was set up by Jamsetji Tata that came up with producing steel.